Okay, so for our last question, number 16, we're going to talk about simplifying rational functions. This is not difficult. It's actually taking factoring and it's kind of putting it on steroids a little bit. But as long as you keep the top and the bottom separate, you should be just fine. So anytime we're going to be doing factoring, obviously the very first thing that we always look for is always going to be our GCF. That still holds true for this one as well. All right, so then after we've done our GCF, that's when we're actually going to do our factoring. So we'll do our factoring, whichever method we need to use. And then, of course, we're going to reduce. And whenever we give our final answer, it's going to keep it in factored form. Okay, we don't want to multiply everything back out, so we're going to keep it all in factored form. Okay, so looking at question A, we have 8x squared plus 8x over 2x plus 2. Okay, so again, I'm just going to work it. I'm going to look at the top first, and then I'm going to look at the bottom. So I have 8x squared plus 8x. Well, obviously, they both have an 8x in common, so I know my 8x is going to come out front. And then mentally in my head, I know I'm going to pull the 8x out, so there will be an x left over and a plus 1. All right, for my denominator, I have 2x plus 2. They both have a 2 in common, so he's going to come out front. And I have an x plus 1. Okay, so I pulled out my GCFs in this case. I didn't have to factor any further after that. Now I'm going to reduce. So that means that I'm actually going to take, and I'm going to take the matching things, that x plus 1, and they're going to cancel each other out. And I'm going to be left with 8x over 2. Well, 8x over 2 also reduces. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So I know my final answer is just going to be 4x. All right, B. I have x squared minus 1 over x plus 1. Looking at that numerator, I know x squared minus 1 is a difference of squares. So I am going to have to, I'm going to have to remember that it's x, I have to remember that it is x minus 1, x plus 1. My denominator does not reduce any further, so I know he's going to be just x plus 1. Once I have done that, I know that I can then cancel out those x plus 1s, and I am left with my x minus 1 as my answer. Okay, C. X squared minus 25, I know is a difference of squares. Looking at my denominator, though, it's 5 minus x. Well, I don't like it like that, so I'm actually going to rewrite it so that that's an x first, because that's what I'm used to seeing, so that becomes a negative x plus 5. So that allows me to look at it slightly different. All right, so I'm going to start with my top. I have x squared minus 25. Of course, that's a difference of squares. I know that it's x minus 5, x plus 5. All right, now once I rearranged that 5 minus x to become negative x plus 5, if you remember correctly, I don't like negatives in the front, so I know I'm going to have to pull the negative out front by itself so that I'm pulling the negative, which is changing the signs, so that becomes a positive x and a negative 5. Once I've done that, I know that I can cancel out so that I am left with x plus 5, what ends up being a negative 1. But of course, I don't like that, so I know I'm actually going to take and bring that negative up top, so that becomes a negative x plus 5. Remember, I leave it in my factored form, so really you can take it and look at it as right at this step, you just took that x plus 5 and you pulled that negative to the top. All right, D. I have x cubed plus 5x squared plus 6x. What do they all have in common? They all have an x. So I know for the top, I'm going to have to pull an x out, and I'm left with x squared plus 5x plus 6. All right, so that's the top. I'm not done with him. I'm going to go ahead and look at the bottom. I have x squared minus 4. That is a difference of squares. So I know I end up with an x minus 2 and an x plus 2. Now I'm going to go back to the top. I have to figure out, okay, well, what times what gives me 6, but adds to be 5. Well, I know that that's a positive 2, positive 3. So I have that x that I pulled out. Then I have my x plus 2 and my x plus 3. Bring my x minus 2 and x plus 2 over because I'm not doing anything else to them. Now that I've got my factors, I can start canceling out. The only two things that are in common on top and bottom is that x plus 2. So they cancel out. And again, I leave everything in its factors so that I have that x and x plus 3 remaining in the top and an x minus 2 remaining in the bottom. I'm not going to cancel anything else out because I can only cancel out factor to factor. So he is in his most reduced form. E. Oh, again, I have a negative 10 minus x. I'm going to rearrange it so that it has an x first. So I have a negative x minus 10. And just like the previous problem C, I don't like negatives in front of my x's. So I'm going to pull that negative out, which changes the sign of both of them so that I get an x plus 10. And now I'm going to do, let's see, I have x squared plus 11x plus 10. I have to figure out, well, what times what gives me 10, but adds to be 11. Well, the only thing I have is 10 and 1. So I have x plus 10 and x plus 1. I cancel out top and bottom. I have my cancels are x plus 10 over x plus 10. Now, they didn't just go away. I'm not going to write negative over x plus 1, okay? This is the same as being like if I had like a negative 2 over, 2x, right? I know that these two things would reduce, but I end up still having a negative 1 over x, right? So this is the exact same concept. I end up with a negative 1 on top. When everything else cancels out, I still have a numerator and I still have a denominator. And this is my final answer.